Good evening. I'm Liz Schreier, President and CEO of the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition. I'm thrilled to welcome you to USGLC's 2021 tribute celebration to what will be a spectacular evening. I join you tonight from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. While it may be a tad chilly, I start here to tell a story. I grew up in Illinois, the land of Lincoln. And like many of you, I was inspired by Abraham Lincoln's historic leadership. That even in our imperfect democracy, he had this unique ability to bring different people together, creating unusual coalitions for the common good of our republic. Lincoln was a great storyteller, but he also was a great listener, famously saying government is of the people, by the people, for the people. And this is the backdrop for our celebration tonight. It's a story of engagement, of leadership, of bringing people together. It's the story of how America's global leadership is central to making the world a better and safer place. Now, as we near the 2-year mark of the global pandemic, we know all too well how it has been a devastating wake-up call that America simply cannot ignore what's happening outside our borders. It's why earlier this year, the USGLC launched a new campaign to hold a nationwide conversation with one simple question: what's it worth? To ensure a global pandemic never, ever happens again. To stop the next global crisis before it spirals out of control. To get our economic recovery fully on track. So we traveled the country, often zooming in and out of your homes. We hosted hundreds of town hall meetings with members of Congress so they could hear from their constituents. We asked, what's it worth? Diplomacy, foreign aid, global health. And we heard loud and clear, it means healthier lives here at home. It means more customers. It means safety for those who serve. You know, these are kitchen table issues that matter to every family. American leadership matters, like our commitment to donate more than 1 billion vaccine doses globally, more than every other country combined, saving lives and helping to end this pandemic. America leads in many ways, partnering in the fight against global hunger and climate change, competing economically, lifting up our democratic values, all of these things that matter here at home. And that's where tonight's honorees come in. We'll celebrate the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, who inspires us all to care for the most vulnerable. You'll meet 2 remarkable bipartisan leaders in the United States Senate, Senators Jean Shaheen and Todd Young. And for the first time ever, we'll pay tribute to a bipartisan group of nearly 100 U.S. mayors from towns and cities across the country, showcasing how leading globally matters locally, including USGLC's co-chair, Mayor Steve Benjamin. You won't want to miss a single spotlight of these heroes. It is awe-inspiring as I look out on the beauty and grace of the National Mall. And for me, it brings back memories of a dear friend who often hosted our nation's annual Memorial Day concert. That's General Colin Powell. For nearly 16 years, the USGLC was truly honored that he served as our national chair due to his deep conviction in the power of America's global leadership. As he told the world, we're strongest when the face of America isn't only a soldier carrying a gun, but also a diplomat negotiating peace, a Peace Corps volunteer bringing clean water to a village, or a relief worker stepping off a cargo plane. Tonight, we begin with a special tribute, celebrating the life and legacy of General Colin Powell. And I believe Abraham Lincoln would have been very proud.
I want to thank the American people and the nation for the privilege of serving. I love this country with all my heart, with all my soul. There's a love without limit. I have a bottomless faith in the goodness of this land, the goodness of its people. I am proud to be an American. I am so proud to have been an American soldier.
I think the legacy of Colin Powell would be, as he talked to everyone, whether it was a private or a general or whoever, just his ability to relate and to connect. You could see They were moved by the fact that, this great man is really interested in who I am and what I'm doing. And it was not just something that he was able to do or had cultivated. It came from the heart.
And he was somebody who was enthusiastic about life, enthusiastic about our country, about what we could do if we all pulled together. And I watched in so many circumstances during the tough times that we went through after 9/11, when he was just someone who always believed we could do it. And you could see how, as a young soldier, as a young military leader, he must have somehow communicated that to his troops.
When I was a student at National War College, and he talked with real humility and a genuine sense that the military can't do it all. We have got to have our partners from State Department. We've got to have our partners from USAID. And that resonated with me as a young commander, and I carried it with me through my entire career, this sense of working together.
I'm deeply honored that President Bush nominated me to be the 65th Secretary of State. I'm very, very pleased to be following in the footsteps of all who went before me, and especially in the footsteps of a good friend of mine, Secretary Madeleine Albright, who served this nation with such distinction.
Is he understood that America's strength comes from being able to use other tools, thinking that our assistance made a difference, USAID, understanding that America needed to have a larger role in the world, but not all with the use of force.
He really did understand the importance of the Foreign Service. He treated them with respect. He treated them as the professionals that they are.
That true greatness means that you see the world in all the dimensions that we may have to engage in. You can go back to the Powell doctrine. You can see that come through.
So what you got from Colin Powell was the realism of the New York streets that he grew up in, combined with this foundational sense of the positive, this idea that some have called smart power. Colin Powell was embodying those ideas before they were a slogan.
We're going to show a vision to the world of the value system of America, what we're all about, what democracy and freedom is all about. We're going to talk about these values all the time and hope that it is the light that we send forth that will influence people around the world. And we'll do it from a position of strength, our political strength, our economic strength, our military strength, and above all, our diplomatic strength.
Is he understood the relationship between domestic and foreign policy, the real way that USGLC meant an awful lot to him. Was that all your activities that are all over the United States, to explain to people that America's strength comes from being able to use other tools.
And then, of course, when he left government, he continued to build those very strong instruments, including this global leadership coalition, because he also recognized that American leadership wasn't just what the government did, but it was what civil society did as well. And so he believed in the complete package in promoting American interest and American values.
And he was dedicated to having young people take their place in terms of promoting America's values, of understanding that democracy is not a spectator sport, and being ready to take their role very seriously.
And I think his legacy will be this soldier statesman, because he truly filled that role as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, rose to the highest position in uniform, and then as Secretary of State, the highest position as a diplomat.
Can there be a more American story, rising from those beginnings to become one of the iconic great American leaders in the 250 years of our nation's voyage? I think in that sense, he's the kind of leader that I would put in front of any little girl or little boy and say, anything is possible and everything is possible if you follow the kind of values and the character that someone like General Colin Powell displayed for us every day of our lives.
The point is that history and destiny have made America the leader of the world that would be free. And the world that would be free is looking to us for inspiration. The world that would be free trusts America, trusts our values. We cannot step back away from this position of leadership. Where we can make a difference, we must try to make that difference.
Good evening. I'm Selena Jackson of Procter & Gamble.
And I'm Sean Callahan of Catholic Relief Services. Together, we are co-chairs of the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, alongside Norm Coleman and Mayor Steve Benjamin.
And on behalf of the business and NGO communities, we are immensely grateful for the leadership of tonight's congressional honorees, Senators Jean Shaheen of New Hampshire and Todd Young of Indiana. Senator Shaheen has built a powerful reputation as a fierce advocate for women and girls, both at home and abroad, and she has always prioritized working across the aisle to get things done.
Senator Young has been a force for bipartisanship to modernize U.S. foreign assistance and strengthen its impact, and to ensure America can compete and win on the global stage. So tonight we celebrate the leadership and achievements of two incredible senators whose contributions have undoubtedly made the world a better, safer place.
So thank you, Senator Shaheen and Senator Young, for your passion, your commitment, and your tireless work to advance our nation's development, diplomacy, and global health programs that keep Americans safe and advance our interests, both at home and abroad. Congratulations.
Senator Shaheen is a champion of America's global leadership,
supporting legislation to strengthen America's development and diplomacy programs abroad.
And it is through that work that she fights to ensure that our country is looking out for some of the world's most vulnerable people.
Working across the aisle and around the world to support strong and effective development, diplomacy, and global health programs.
Senator Shaheen is incredibly deserving of tonight's honor because of her longstanding public service to our community.
For your dedicated leadership on behalf of New Hampshire, the United States of America, and women everywhere.
Through his diplomacy and global health initiatives, Senator Young has emerged as a leader both at home and on the world stage.
He's made us local leaders aware that the decisions we make here today are impacted not only by our state and national economy, but by our global economies and relationships as well.
And Hoosiers should be proud to have a representative who understands that leading globally also matters locally for us back home.
Senator Shaheen
and Senator Young,
congratulations on a very well-deserved honor.
It's wonderful to see both of you. So let me start by saying on behalf of the entire USGLC community, we are honored and privileged to pay our respect, our honor and tribute to the two of you, Senator Shaheen, Senator Young, for your remarkable career of making a difference in the world, making a better and safer world. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let me start by the fact that both of you have dedicated your careers to serving the American people. And I'd love to hear from both of you how you reflect on your dedication to public service and how it has shaped your views about America's role in the world. How, really in essence, what it's worth to you personally and to your constituents to invest in development and in diplomacy. And Senator Shaheen, if you could begin.
Well, you know, I grew up in a middle-class family. My father worked in a shoe factory, my mother worked for the church, and there was a recognition that you need to give back, that it's important. And then when I got married, my husband is a Lebanese American, and three of his grandfathers immigrated from Lebanon. And they had such a commitment to this country and to succeeding for their families in America. They came here because they wanted what America stands for, you know. And when you think about that and think about the challenges that so many people around the world are facing, it's important for us to think about how we can support people in those countries who want what we have in America.
We are blessed. We're blessed to live in this country. My dad was a small businessman, my mom a registered nurse, so securely sort of middle class, but they always instilled in me and my brother and sister the importance of recognizing how fortunate we were to grow up in a country that is wealthy, to grow up in a country that's safe, and it was important to give back as well. But that spirit of service is what inspired me to join the Marine Corps ultimately out of the Naval Academy and to work for Senator Lugar. And I have to say, working for Senator Lugar and then spending that time in the military made me channel my service into how I can make the world a better place. And it just so happens that the United States plays an instrumental role in ensuring that the world remains stable and prosperous. And to the extent we do, that furthers our own neighbors' dreams and ambitions.
So you have both championed a range of bipartisan legislation and initiatives, in fact, both working very closely together on several of them. I think about how you have supported our allies and partners. You've worked on empowering women and girls. You actually co-chaired a task force to modernize development assistance. In fact, under your leadership with many of your colleagues, in the past decade, over 50 pieces of legislation have been signed into law just in our space. In today's very highly politicized political environment, how is this an area where we have built this bipartisan support for global development and diplomacy? What might you say to a freshman member about why it's so important to build on this legacy of support for America's global leadership?
Well, as the freshman senator, I think I can speak with some authority to that. I'd say number one, by working in a bipartisan fashion, you're drawing more from the talent pool of other United States senators, from senators who have more experience. Jean has worked very effectively and actively in the area of foreign affairs, and she's dealt with military issues, and so I have great respect for the knowledge that she demonstrates on a regular basis, and there are other senators that you can learn from. So that would be point number one. But point number two would be, when it comes to our foreign policy especially, we want more than a measure of stability. We want our actions to have some predictability to them. That instills confidence from both adversaries and friends in what our future direction will be, which we typically want. And you're only going to get that sort of stability when you're working across the aisle in a bipartisan fashion on many of these foreign affairs issues. Yeah.
Well, when I was governor, I had a Republican legislature. And so I learned very quickly that in order to get something done, we had to work together. And if we wanted it to continue, as Todd says, that it's important to have people buy in from both sides of whatever the issue is. I just came from the Halifax International Security Forum, where we had a bipartisan delegation, 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. And it was really reassuring, I think, for the Europeans who were there, for the Canadians, to see us working together. We kept getting the question about partisan politics, and to hear us all say, no, we work together more often than not. Unfortunately, you don't hear about that as much. And so it really is important. You know, one party doesn't have a corner on the best policies, and what we want are policies that are enduring, that people can support, that can help move the country forward. And that's particularly true on foreign policy, where we do want politics to end at the water's edge.
You know, both of you, I watch you work in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and you've had such an impact on many critical issues, but there always are these specific special ones that you really grab onto. Senator Shaheen, I think about your tireless advocacy for women and girls that you've worked on, empowering them economically, protecting them from violence, and making sure women and girls have a seat at the peace and security table. And I could go on and on for each of you, but I'd love in your own voice to speak about what the one piece of legislation in the space you're most proud of.
For me, it's the Women, Peace and Security Act. It's important. We were the first country to do that legislatively. And it means that women are at the table in negotiations of conflicts. You know, women make up half of the world. And the fact that we're not very often at the negotiating table for conflict resolution is just bad policy. Because we know when women are involved in the discussion that whatever the agreement is, lasts longer and is more stable.
Senators, we're nearing the 2-year anniversary of the global pandemic, and it has had a devastating impact, 5 million lives lost, a devastating impact on our global economy, and a backsliding on the development programs that you both have truly championed. And one of the things both of you have talked about is you can't stop a global pandemic without a global response. And I'd welcome your reflections in terms of where our investments need to be made to keep Americans safe.
Well, we need to be a lot better prepared than we were for this pandemic. We need to understand that this is a global environment that we're in, and when we're talking about a virus like COVID, that borders don't mean anything, and that unless we get everyone in the world vaccinated, or at least the majority of people, there is still that threat of mutation, which we're seeing now with the Omicron variant, and we saw with the Delta variant. So we have a lot of work to do. There are other countries, China and Russia, that are using vaccines to further their own interests, and they're not doing it because they're concerned about the global health of the world, but they're doing it to further their own interests. So we've got to understand that we've got to work in the international community to address this pandemic and future pandemics.
Thank you. Senator Young?
You know, there's a hypothesis, I think probably shared by most Americans at this point, that the Chinese Communist Party withheld information from America and the rest of the world, which led to all of these deaths, all of these crushed dreams, and we're still living through this. But that doesn't mean we can cease talking with them, and in fact, it's all the more important that we continue to maintain dialogue and keep open those channels of communication, even as we compete with one another. And then the last thing that comes to mind is just this should be a cautionary tale about the importance of preparing not just for high probability events, but what are perceived to be lower probability but very high cost sort of events. I think of NASA that just launched a missile up and is experimenting with how to divert an asteroid from hitting the United States. You know, in the grand scheme of things, a fairly low probability proposition, but it did snuff out the dinosaurs many eons ago. In the case of pandemics, we're going to increasingly see more of these, according to the experts. So we most certainly need to be preparing for the next one based on the lessons we've learned here.
It is such a privilege for me to represent a community across this country, to thank you for your historic and truly transformational imprint on making this world a better, safer, more prosperous society. You are that global citizen. And I would love in our closing moments for you to share what this moment, maybe this honor, this reflection means to you personally. Senator Young?
Well, it's humbling because there are so many talented colleagues with whom we work, and I know there are so many others who would be worthy of this honor. It's also, I think, encouraging that USGLC is recognizing bipartisan leadership at a time when tribalism has really infected so much of our politics. And it's okay for us to have principled disagreement. Jean and I will moving forward, but that shouldn't obscure many areas of common agreement.
Yes, well, USGLC makes a huge difference in terms of policies that you advocate and a commitment to what's happening in the world. And thank you all for that. And it is recognizing that kind of team approach, as Todd says, that each of us bring to the job. I'm here because of so many people who have worked to help get me here, and it is very humbling to think about being able to be here at this moment right now and try and have an impact on everything that's happening in the world. And so thank you to you and to everyone at USGLC for your work and for this honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Norm Coleman, co-chair of the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, and it's an honor to be part of this celebration with all of you. I'm humbled to have the opportunity to pay tribute tonight to a group of people from across the country who are leading voices on how America's global leadership strengthens our local communities. And of course, I'm talking about America's mayors. From the global pandemic to climate change to migration, American mayors see each and every day how our world is interconnected. And I should know. I've had the pleasure to go on to serve as United States Senator representing the great state of Minnesota, but no job has had a greater impact on me than my job as mayor of the capital city of Minnesota, mayor of St. Paul. As I often say to friends and constituents when they greet me, I tell them as senator, I said, I may have senator in front of my name, but I have mayor stitched in my underwear. Because that's a job where you can get things done. It's a job where you're impacted each and every day, interaction with the people in your community. And for mayors to have not just that local perspective, but a global perspective is so important. Now, the USGLC has brought together nearly 100 mayors, bipartisan, diverse, from heartland to the Sun Belt, from coast to coast, representing rural, urban, and every type of community in between, who believe deeply that America's global leadership starts at home, and that small strategic investments in development and diplomacy abroad can have impact on the health, security, and economy of the cities and the people that they lead. In both big and small ways, mayors are taking on the global challenges facing their communities, building global relationships that are creating economic opportunities between their own communities and communities around the world. And over the past year, many of these mayors have even issued their own official proclamation on what it's worth for their communities to be engaged on the global stage. They've been speaking out, engaging their own elected leaders in Washington on why America has to lead, and then helping to represent the best of American values on the global stage. For their outstanding service, the USGLC is proud to honor this distinguished group of mayors with our Global Statesman Award. Congratulations on a well-deserved honor to each and every one of you. And perhaps no one better embodies the ideals of global statesmen than my friend and fellow USGLC Global Co-Chair, Mayor Steve Benjamin. It's only fitting to have the opportunity to pay tribute to him tonight as he retires after more than a decade of service as the mayor of Columbia, South Carolina.
Hello, everyone. Many thanks to the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition for your great work, and congratulations to all of tonight's very deserving honorees, especially one of America's most dynamic and effective mayors, my good friend, Steve Benjamin. You might not know this about Steve, but he's a native New Yorker, born in Queens. No wonder we hit it off. Steve did such a great job during his first term as mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, that when he decided to run for re-election, everyone dropped out of the race, except for him, of course. When I ran for president in 2020, Steve volunteered to serve as a co-chair of my campaign. I said, great. You're in charge of getting everyone to drop out. But seriously, I've gotten the chance to work with Steve through the Bloomberg-Harvard City Leadership Initiative and on issues like gun safety and disaster relief. And he's been such a strong leader on these and other issues that his fellow mayors elected him to be president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So Steve, thank you for your friendship and partnership. To you and your better half, the judge, who is a powerhouse in her own right, congratulations. I can't wait to see what you'll accomplish next.
Thank you. It's an honor to accept a Global Statesman tribute to mayors across America, and it's also an honor to serve as co-chair of the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition. Mayors are truly on the front lines, not just across America, but all across the globe, getting things done on behalf of our citizens. The global pandemic has become the ultimate reminder of exactly how interconnected and interdependent we all are. And there's no longer anything foreign about foreign policy. It's why mayors are stepping up on why leading globally matters locally. Speaking on behalf of all my brother and sister mayors all across this country, the Global Statesman tribute to us all and this recognition of our work means so very much. And it underscores just how important it is for mayors to continue to stay engaged, to make our voices heard on why America has to lead on critical global issues of the day that impact each and every one of our families, our communities, and our citizens. So again, the two most important words in the English language. Thank you.
I don't think there are too many cities that aren't global cities anymore, at least if you want to be any kind of place where people want to be.
When we think globally, we grow our businesses. When we think globally, we grow our talent pipeline. When we think globally, good things happen.
We have people from all over the world that are here in Scranton,
in Ocala,
Las Cruces,
Dayton, Scottsdale,
Findlay, Ohio.
Mayors are unique because cities are unique. Mayors are on the ground. We embody the diversity, the ingenuity, the can-do spirit that we think represents the very best of public service in this country.
We live with our residents. And if you're not thinking globally, you're really not going to be able to serve everybody in your community.
I mean, if you don't genuinely care about people, politics is the wrong business for you to be in.
I think there's something to be said about the middle of the country where most people live in this country. There are places like Dayton. And so having a real understanding of the overall world for our citizens and for our community is really important.
For a city of 80,000 people, we've got companies from all over the planet. We do international business trips to bring companies back.
And I have an interesting role. I am the closer for our city to the international business groups that may want to talk about landing here.
Scranton was built on immigration and entrepreneurship. Lots of small and medium manufacturing. Those folks are exporting their goods on a global scale.
We are a global city, and the main reason is because we embrace aerospace and technology.
Sort of business 101, the larger your marketplace, the more opportunities you have for customers.
Being engaged globally, that doesn't mean that we are taking our eye off the ball of our home base, but really continuing to grow.
Diplomacy is just so important.
Person-to-person contact breaks any barriers of country, state, city, and that spirit is what the U.S. State Department really cultivates. And it's a skill. It takes skill. It's not automatic.
Our presence across the world, it helps us, not only from the national security, but from the economic security perspective. It's vital.
Because we can see that connection on the ground, it makes it really important to what our country and what America is doing, leading in that gives strength to communities like Dayton.
Ultimately, there's a huge impact.
And then there's really a moral component of it too. If we haven't learned anything from COVID, the United States leadership role globally is so incredibly important.
Whether you're small cities such as us or medium-sized or large cities, we all have to work together so that our country can show the rest of the world, hey, this is what we're doing. Because it's important.
Not a day goes by that mayors across this country are engaged with our elected leaders in Washington. We're hosting events with our fellow citizens, talking about the importance of diplomacy and development. And we're using our voice. We're speaking out.
Using my voice to support USGLC is something that I've been proud to do, whether it's penning op-eds or sharing to other mayors and new leaders.
I've been to events here in Florida, Jacksonville, Orlando, Tampa, a variety of different places, Washington.
We're engaged with the State Department and USAID. We're connecting with our business community and NGOs and even in some communities, farmers, helping everyone understand, again, our interconnectedness and interdependence, issuing proclamations, writing op-eds.
Citizen education is really key. Being able to communicate and help them understand the global presence that our businesses have here locally and how those federal policies or global policies impact us locally.
We're also the home to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
We have 37,000 veterans that live in our county. 10% of our community are veterans. I've talked to military folks whose sons and daughters have died in battle. For our veterans, for our military, if we can solve problems without them having to go to war, that would obviously be a good thing.
That responsibility of the safety and health of your community weighs very much on us.
For every dollar spent in foreign aid, it saves 10 times the bullets.
And it's worth the safety and the saving of American lives.
In my city, it would be tough to get elected not focused on what's happening in the world around us. We have our issues at home, the kitchen table issues. Each and every one of those kitchen table issues are impacted by what happens around the world.
Could you get elected? I don't know. I wouldn't want to try it because I understand that it's so important to be global, to think globally, act locally, but think globally.
So as a mayor, it's really about being that advocate for our community and our citizens and recognizing that any global policy changes have a ripple effect. That's really where kind of the rubber meets the road.
When we don't, it typically comes back. It's just like thinking about a neighborhood, right? You have a very successful neighborhood, and then all of a sudden you have an adjacent neighborhood that is not thriving. What is happening in the other neighborhood is going to impact the other. And that's how we should think of the world.
I'm hopeful for the future because with more and more mayors stepping up on the global stage, we're getting things done for our communities and demonstrating not just that leading globally matters locally, but also that leading locally matters globally.
Hi, I'm David Miliband, President and CEO of the International Rescue Committee and a proud board member of the US Global Leadership Coalition. The clients of the International Rescue Committee, 31 million of them last year, know the value of US leadership. From the Rohingya refugees now sheltering in Bangladesh to victims of war in Syria or in South Sudan, to those on the run in Latin America from danger, they know that the difference between hope and fear, between dignity and indignity, is the generosity and the commitment of the American people. They also know that US leadership is strongest when the US is not alone. And it's in a context that there could be no more fitting honoree than our next guest, the Secretary General of the UN, His Excellency Antonio Guterres. The 51st Secretary of State of the United States, Dean Acheson, called his memoirs Present at the Creation. But of course, the United States wasn't just present at the creation of the post-Second World War global order. The United States was a leader of that post-Second World War order that brought an unprecedented period of peace and prosperity. Despite the extraordinary challenges of the Cold War, the period after the Second World War was one when the ideals of the United Nations, ideals centered on the rights of individuals as well as the rights of states, had American leadership on an ongoing and incredibly committed basis. We know that today those ideals are under challenge, no more so than in the world's war zones where impunity rather than accountability is the order of the day. Our honoree, Antonio Guterres, has the responsibility of upholding the ideals of the UN Charter at this very difficult time. I first met Antonio Guterres when he was the Prime Minister of Portugal. In that role, he was a reformer, he was a persuader, and he was a finisher. And in his first 5 years as Secretary General of the UN, he's again shown himself to be a reformer, a persuader, and a finisher. Now, as he starts his second 5-year term, he set out what he calls our common agenda for the 2020s, an agenda offering hope where there is fear and offering dignity where too often there is impunity. In that effort, US leadership is absolutely critical, and so there could be no more fitting honoree than Antonio Guterres tonight. The world is safer and stronger thanks to US leadership, and the world is safer and stronger thanks to the leadership of Antonio Guterres.
Mr. Secretary General, we value your partnership with the United States tremendously. Throughout your career, you have focused on the humanitarian needs of people around the world. Now it is an honor to work with you each and every day to take on some of the world's biggest challenges, from COVID-19 to climate change to protecting and promoting human rights everywhere. In this important moment, the United Nations needs your critical leadership. So here's a toast To Secretary General Antonio Guterres, may your second term propel us toward a more peaceful and more prosperous world.
Multilateral action led by the United Nations has achieved an enormous amount over the past 76 years, from preventing a third world war to eradicating smallpox. But solutions to today's challenges also depend on action from civil society, the private sector and others, particularly young people.
The United States leadership and generosity have always been indispensable. It is no coincidence that the first words of the UN Charter, "We the peoples," echo the US Constitution. We want the world our children inherit to be defined by the values enshrined in the UN Charter: peace, justice, respect, human rights, tolerance, and solidarity.
So, congratulations on this honor from the GLC. We wanted first to talk to you about your leadership style and what motivates you. So, many years ago, you served for a decade as Prime Minister of Portugal. And one might have thought that you would retire. It is the highest position in the country. But you did not. You came and served as the High Commissioner of Refugees at the United Nations to look after people in need. And now you serve as our Secretary General of the United Nations. Would you talk a bit about what drives you to this commitment to public service? What should we know?
Well, I would say the central element that determines my decisions during my life has been the parable of the talents. I consider myself to be extremely privileged. I had a wonderful family. My parents guaranteed me the best education available in Portugal. I think it's my obligation, with humility, to do my best in the different stages of my life to serve the people. And then, of course, the most vulnerable of the vulnerable, the refugees, I had the chance to serve in this position. Those were the most exciting 10 years of my life. I've never done, and I will never do, anything more useful and more, rewarding than to feel the resilience, the courage, the determination of those people, and to be able to help them. You have the same feeling in UNICEF. You can take decisions that make the life of people different. And so I made myself available for Secretary General, probably with too much optimism about the capacity of a Secretary General to help the people in need, to support the people in need. I feel that my life makes sense if I'm able to multiply the talents that God gave me and to put them at the service of the people we all care for.
Well, I think with your life story that it is clear that you have made the most of talents and that you are still using them. So it is wonderful for all of us that you are Secretary General of the United Nations. So would you speak a bit about how the United Nations makes a difference for America, for Americans? After World War I, America was very weary of war and pulled back. After World War II, we wanted to engage. We wanted to set up institutions that would change the world, that would accomplish many of the things that you were talking about. And so would you talk a bit about why the UN is important to America and why America is important to the UN?
First of all, America is essential to the UN. It is not only our main contributor, but it is the biggest power in the world. And so the American influence is largely the leverage of the United Nations when we try to reach a peace agreement, when we try to address human rights concerns, when we try to promote more equal development in different parts of the world. And we have seen it, and we see it today in so many areas. The moment America assumed the leadership in climate, everything changed in the world. And so America is vital for the United Nations. There is a clear understanding that a country alone cannot solve every problem, and that only by bringing together those that have the same values, it is possible to face the enormous challenges that we have, be it in climate, be it in the impacts of technology, be it in the risks of pandemics, and that the UN can play there a very important role. Peacekeeping has been a fantastic instrument for the US in several parts of the world, keeping peace and stability with a very low cost. I believe the UN is an important instrument for the values that are the values of the US democracy.
So you just spoke about the pandemic. Let's turn to COVID-19. You have been a formidable advocate about the importance of the United Nations and the world to pay attention to the pandemic and to the equality that is needed in the world. Would you talk a bit about what you see that is needed now in this time of COVID-19?
I mean, what we need is solidarity. COVID-19 is a threat to the whole of humanity, but humanity was not able to come together in an effective way to fight the virus. Every country has fought the virus with its own strategies and resources, and the truth is that we are facing today this dramatic situation in which, in my country, Portugal, 88% of the population is vaccinated. I just received the African Union yesterday, and only 6% of the population in Africa is vaccinated. And here I think the role of the UN and UNICEF has played a fantastic role on that. And so there is a role of support to the least developed countries in fighting the COVID and in creating the conditions for the recovery of the economy, in which our voice, our action, our capacity to convene, to mobilize is very important. And we need to be in the front line to help the world fight the virus and to help the world recover in an inclusive and sustainable way from the virus.
Well, you have been very, very persuasive about vaccines for everyone, everywhere. So may we turn to humanitarian work. Today we've been launching humanitarian action plans around the world. And if I may quote you, one of the things you have said when you were at UNHCR and protecting and caring for the most vulnerable is that you said that you saw a fundamental human trait, acts of compassion, the impulse of one person to help another in trauma. And you added that these are among the essential hallmarks of humanity. So with the number of refugees now over 82 million people, how do we bring that humanity back to our world?
We need to recognize that, unfortunately, there are more and more reasons that force to flee because of conflict and persecution. And so the first thing we need to do is prevention, to avoid refugees to exist. And this is something that today mobilizes the whole of the UN system as an absolute priority. There is a story that I never forgot. I was in Tunisia when all the people fled from Libya. Remember a moment in which millions of people fled from Libya, I mean refugees, migrants, all kinds of... I saw a group, and the group was a couple from the city where I was, in Tunisia, and I asked who the others were, and they said, oh, these are refugees that fled from Syria, from the conflict, and that we host in our house. And then I asked them, and how did you, I mean, you are family, you knew each other? No. They came to our town, and when they asked us where there was a place to stay, I asked them, who are you? And they explained their situation. I said, come to our house. And they were for 3 months already in the house of the other family. I mean, these are fantastic things, and these things give us, I mean, an enthusiasm and a compulsion to do everything we can to support people. I mean, this is a world of egoism. This is a world of conflict. This is a world of war, of dictatorship. But this is a world of enormous solidarity, enormous generosity in so many people. And that must be an inspiration for us all.
You will be glad to know that we have thousands of young people online tonight, and that they would want to join me in congratulating you on this award by the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition. But you also might have a message for them. As the leader of UNICEF, I know how much you care about and think about the next generation. But I'm sure that they would like to hear some words from you on how you see their future and why they should get involved and engaged in the world around them.
Well, first of all, I'd like to tell you that they are my best hope. I mean, our generation has essentially failed in combining development with equity and with sustainability. We see so many conflicts, we see so many dramatic problems of poverty and hunger. We see climate change not being properly handled. We see a pandemic. And my hope is the younger generations, because the younger generations have shown that they are much more open-minded. They feel much more as citizens of the world. They feel much more the logic that we are all together on these. And so recognizing these, my appeal is for them not to give up, not to feel that they have no power. They have an enormous power of their voice, and they can prepare themselves to rule the world in a much better way than our generation was able to do.
Well, that is an excellent message for all of our young people, that they are citizens of the world and they should feel the power to be them. So, Secretary General, you embody being an excellent servant leader, and we're very proud of your award tonight. Thank you.
What a night. As we close this evening's celebration, I want to thank everyone who made it possible. USGLC's Board of Directors, led by Sean Callahan, Selena Jackson, Senator Norm Coleman, and of course our honoree, Mayor Steve Benjamin. Our celebration chair, David Miliband, and all of our sponsors. A special shout out to our advisory councils, our state advisory committees, and all of our advocates from around the country. To our friends from Capitol Hill, the executive branch, and beyond, thank you for joining, working with us, and celebrating with us tonight. We have a fantastic closing number from the State Department's American Music Abroad program, Freedom's Boombox, who joined us last year from their travels around the world as cultural ambassadors. I'm so excited to share that they are the recent recipients of the Citizen Diplomacy Action Fund grant, where they are going to be able to continue their music and cultural diplomacy. To close out our program, welcome back to our stage Alfredo Austin and Freedom's Boombox. And from all of us at USGLC, we wish you and yours a joyous holiday season.
Hello everybody, Alfredo Austin of Freedom's Boombox here, and I'm so honored to be back here with all of you for another tribute celebration. Now, Freedom's Boombox are huge fans of USGLC and the incredible nationwide network of people working to make the world a better place. Through our work as cultural diplomats with the State Department's American Music Abroad program, we have been so fortunate to perform, teach, and develop music programs for underserved youth all around the world. And as you just heard, we recently received the Citizen Diplomacy Action Fund grant, meaning we get to keep doing what we love and see firsthand the impact that America's global leadership has overseas. After nearly 2 long, very challenging years, we are so thrilled to get back making music next year with kids all around the world, and I have a feeling our travels just might inspire a whole new album. But tonight, this next song goes out to all of you. Thank you for what you do. We see the impacts everywhere we travel, and it truly does make a difference. Enjoy.
Oh.